Ladies and gentlemen, independent Americans around the country and around the world, happy Valentine's Day, happy Mardi Gras, happy Snow Day. There's a lot going on in the world, and especially in the legal and political world. And I'm very happy and honored to bring back a returning champion, one of our favorite guests, the great and powerful Asha Rangappa is back on Independent Americans. Welcome back, my friend.
Thanks, Paul. I'm glad to be back.
I ask everyone, where are you and how are you on this very cold time on the East Coast?
Yeah, I am in Hamden, Connecticut, near New Haven. I work at Yale, so it just snowed yesterday. A lot of snow on the ground right now.
And how are you? What's it like teaching in the midst of all this madness? I'm sure you've got students hungry for knowledge and full of opinions, but colleges have also now become this hotbed of politics and controversy. So what's it like to be at Yale right now?
For me, it's been great. I feel like my students are really open-minded and they love to debate and, are open to all kinds of opinions. And actually, I'm teaching national security law right now. And what I love is that Trump always follows along in my syllabus and gives me lots of great hypotheticals to present to them for them to mull over. So I'm actually looking forward to class today. I'm not looking forward to digging myself out of the snow to get there, but the class itself will be great.
Your students are lucky to have you. I can't get into all of the Trump Biden everything without asking, because this was maybe the most political Super Bowl we've ever seen. Did you watch the game? Do you have thoughts on it and the related multiple controversies surrounding it?
I did watch the game. I mean, I mainly watched the end. I'm not a huge football person, but I had it on, and then I did kind of get sucked in at the end. I had to double check which team makes MAGA crazy because that was the team that I decided that I was going to root for because I have no other investment in the Super Bowl, and so I was pretty happy with the result.
Yeah, it's upside down world when MAGA is rooting for San Francisco, right? Like somewhere Nancy Pelosi is smiling, right? Um,
Exactly.
but the game was only slightly crazier, or maybe slightly less crazy than our politics and national security. You've got such great perspective. I carried my FBI coffee cup in
Oh,
honor of you. I was honored to speak there a couple years ago on Veterans Day. But let me start by asking you maybe a straight up question, because we're coming out of the Super Bowl that was in Vegas and a lot of people are betting. In your view, is Trump going to go to jail before the election? And do you think he will be found guilty on anything in a court before the election?
I do not think that he will be in jail before the election. I think that there is a very strong chance that he may be convicted of one or more crimes before the election.
Can we break that down? Because, I feel like even for me as a person who's in political news, it sometimes kind of washes over me.
Yep.
And as often as I'm on MSNBC, that's an extremely skewed viewpoint. I know that I'm not going to be on MSNBC on any day there's any kind of minute Trump news. That means usually national security is off. But can you kind of break it down for us? What do you think? Maybe a threat assessment to Trump. What are his most immediate pressing threats?
Yeah, and it is understandable if you are overwhelmed with the legal news. I actually made a Trump court cases cheat sheet for my Substack, which you might want to include for your viewers and listeners. I did it actually for myself, but I think it would be helpful for a lot of people following the news. And right now, I think the big question is we have four major criminal cases ongoing. And the question is, which one will actually go to trial, because each of them has been held up for one reason or another. And right now, we thought for a little while that maybe the January 6th federal case might go first. That was scheduled for March 4th. But right now, the legal issue that Trump raised, which is his absolute immunity argument, you might remember the SEAL Team 6 claim that a president could order SEAL Team 6 to murder their rival and not be held accountable. That issue, which was decided against him in the appellate court, has gone in front of the Supreme Court. So we have to see what the Supreme Court does with that. Will they take the case? Will they stay the circuit court's proceedings? in any event, that case will not go to trial on March 4th. The classified documents case is moving at a snail's pace. That is in some ways to be expected because it involves national security, classified documents. There's a lot of hearings about how that is exchanged between the parties. So that one is going slow. It's not going to go anytime soon. And the Georgia case has got some problems right now because the prosecutor there is under fire for some possible ethical violations. So I think what we're likely to see is the Manhattan DA case go first. And this is a flashback to season 1. So all of your favorite characters from season 1 of the Trump Show, Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen, are all going to be back on the scene. And I think it's actually fitting in a way because the whole Stormy Daniels hush money payment to me is the OG of election interference. And I think that that is the theory of Bragg's case. I think what he's going to say is, look, I know this is about falsification of business records. It might seem not important, but really what was being concealed here was information that voters might have voted differently had they known. And so his intention was to basically defraud the voting public.
So you've got folks who are Yankee fans, maybe you can understand this comparison. When you go to Yankee games, they do the great train race where you've got like all the trains that lead to Yankee Stadium are up on the big board and they race to Yankee Stadium and everybody cheers for a different train. And I feel like that's the Democrats right now for sure, and much of America, maybe some inside the Republican Party. And what Trump wants to do is to slow all the trains down, get a couple of them to derail. His strategy is not unlike Putin's, right? He wants to delay, and kind of wear everybody out. And it feels to me like in that regard, he's winning. I mean, this Fannie Willis fiasco is just like, it's an early Easter present for Trump here. I mean, he's licking his chops. And I don't know how this happens. I mean, maybe can you just help us understand? I mean, they vet candidates. Does Fannie Willis not go through some kind of vetting process to expose vulnerabilities that could, jeopardize the entire case on behalf of the American people? How does that happen?
Well, let's get to Fani in a second, but I think your point about the delay is really important, and it just to unpack that a little bit. The reason that Trump wants to delay is that it's not that being convicted would actually stop him from continuing to run for president, from winning the presidency, from actually holding office. There's nothing that bars him. He can be a convicted felon and still be president of the United States. He can be sentenced to jail and still be president of the United States. So people need to understand that. But what he does get if he becomes president is he gets enormous levers of power. And if he is president, he also gets to appoint the attorney general, which means that he can actually make these federal cases disappear. And if he becomes president, the states, which are separate sovereigns, theoretically could still proceed in their cases, but I think it's an outstanding legal question on whether a state can prosecute a sitting president. So that would then get further tied up in all kinds of legal shenanigans. So you can see that his interest here is to essentially make these cases go away. So speaking of cases going away, Fani Willis is an elected prosecutor. So really the vetting is supposed to come from the voters. And, look, she has been a successful prosecutor. She's prosecuted several cases very successfully. I think here she had in my opinion, a major lapse in judgment. I think here's my PSA to prosecutors prosecuting what might be the biggest case of your career and probably the biggest case in the history of the country, is to not get into a relationship with the special prosecutor that you've hired to prosecute your case. Just wait for the trial to be over. Like, instant gratification is not your friend in this situation. And so the question here for her is whether she has a conflict of interest because of this personal relationship, and especially whether there was any kind of financial benefit that she received, because remember, she hired the special prosecutor, Nathan Wade. He gets paid a salary from the state of Georgia. And then they were going on vacations together, and the allegation that's being made by one of the defendants is that essentially this allows her to benefit from the money that Nathan Wade is making, and in some way gives them an incentive to continue this case. I should point out, by the way, that the defendant that actually brought this motion to disqualify her is an Oppo researcher. So
Yeah.
maybe if you're deciding to indict an Oppo researcher, you want to make sure all your skeletons are out. And she could have disclosed this to the court. She could have
Right.
said up front, that this relationship was happening. Actually, that's not a basis for disqualification. There's some case law on that. And it just goes to, I mean, candor is always going to be your friend, I think, in these kinds of situations. So if the judge disqualifies her, and he has said that it can be an actual conflict of interest or the appearance of a conflict of interest, what happens is not just Bonnie Willis, but her entire office gets disqualified from prosecuting this case, which means that I don't know exactly who it falls to, maybe the governor. Like, they have to find an entirely new DA's office to take on this case, to get up to speed with what's left now. I think 15 defendants and all of the legal issues, this huge sprawling RICO case, which I think effectively means that it becomes a very slim chance that this ends up seeing a jury.
So that train is like off the tracks going to Queens, right? Like that train is in from an outside view, and I see a conflict of interest. I want Trump to go to jail as much as anybody, but this Fannie Willis thing is a disaster, and if she seems like she's delaying the inevitable, and she should just step down or give it up. It's like watching Senator Menendez, try to fight this out when he's got his hand in a cookie jar. I mean, it's just she's hurting everyone by trying to fight this. So I'm not putting my eggs in that basket. But for those of us that are in the national security space that seem to feel like many of these things are important, but the insurrection thing is kind of a big deal. Why is that not have a finer point? Why is the insurrection component not front and center? Because my argument is whether he goes to jail or not, whether he's convicted or not, whether he wins or not, he is a national security threat because of what he's doing, because of what he says, because his threats of violence, because his ability and willingness to mobilize people toward violence. So every day he's walking free, I think he's a danger to our country. But why has the insurrection piece not been more focused on him and not moved forward faster when it feels like that is the most dangerous of them all?
Do you mean the January 6th case in federal
Yes,
court?
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
well, that's the one that's been tied up with this absolute immunity argument. And the special counsel, Jack Smith, has actually initially, after Judge Chutkin ruled against Trump on that claim, tried to get when Trump appealed it, tried to get that appeal directly to the Supreme Court to just get that resolved, because once that's resolved, that trial can go forward. And obviously, as we just said, Trump wants to slow that down. And I think it will really be interesting to see how the Supreme Court handles that. Now, the Supreme Court, it is looking very likely that they are going to overturn the Colorado decision disqualifying Trump from the ballot. I think they're going to find some way to say that he can't be disqualified unless Congress does something. So I mean, my personal opinion is that they might then balance that out by just saying, hey, we're not going to hear this absolute immunity claim. There's really nothing for us to clean up here. This is a pretty obvious, standard that, everyone has to be held accountable under the criminal laws of the United States, in which case that case can proceed. And then if that case does proceed, I do think the insurrection piece will come front and center. Now, he's been charged with 4 crimes in that case. 3 of them involve conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct a proceeding of Congress, obstructing an official proceeding. So that all goes to kind of the attempt to stop the vice president from counting the votes and getting a fake slate of electors. But one of those charges is also a conspiracy against rights. And this is a criminal statute that was passed in the aftermath of the Civil War as a way of enforcing the Reconstruction Amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, because Blacks were being intimidated from exercising their civil rights. And so that is the one that gets to the use of force and intimidation to prevent people from vindicating their civil rights, in this case, from having their votes counted. So if that can get in front of a jury, then Jack Smith will be presenting a lot of evidence about the way in which Trump incited violence, that his intention was to intimidate our government, our members of Congress, to prevent them from allowing the will of the people to go forward. So we really need that to happen before the election, I think, for that to take center stage.
Which I feel like politically is also the most damaging to him because I think there's some Democrats right now who might be saying, shit, we hope he stays out of jail because it's looking like he's down in the polls in some areas, especially among independents. Maybe, but a lot of the pundits, I think, have this wrong. And I think Trump is weaker against Biden than many people are predicting. And I think he's continuing to get weaker. So I feel like those are the things that really matter to voters too, because they can see it, right? Like the stuff with Stormy Daniels and all the other components seem kind of mysterious and bureaucratic, but the January 6th stuff, was there for everyone to see. You can read the tweets, you can see what he said. We saw what happened. I think that's especially damning. And you've got a Boy Scout like Jack Smith, right? Like who reminds me of Robert Mueller. We've got these Boy Scouts that they put up that seem to have been vetted, that seem to have been almost politically bulletproof. But in the context of all of this, Asha, is also this Biden report. And I want to ask you about that because, again, independent Americans, we've got people from all sides, but a lot of independents who are trying to call balls and strikes here, right? And when I hear that report, I understand you can say, Biden allies can say he went overboard and it's a hit job. But at the end of the day, it's still kind of damning, right? It basically said he's old and he didn't know what he was doing when handling classified documents, which I guess you could make as a legal argument, but kind of cuts to the core of what worries people the most about Biden, not just because of his age, but also this is the part that people don't want to say out loud because most people don't trust Kamala Harris to be president, especially independents and moderates, right? Liberal base loves Kamala Harris, but if you want to move independents, those are the kinds of things that move them one way or the other. So can you call it straight from your standpoint, this Biden report that really calls out his age and frailty, if you will? What's your takeaway and read on this?
Yeah. So just one quick note, just on the January 6th political front, and then I'll move to the Biden one, is that the other reason that that case will be incredibly politically damaging for Trump is that the witnesses will all be Republicans. And people will be hearing Republicans who under oath will testify truthfully as they did in front of the January 6th committee. And I think that itself will be really, something that would be hard for Trump to overcome.
Yeah.
On her report, I think this was in some ways a sloppily written report because the executive summary seems to suggest that Biden willfully retained classified documents. That's what everyone seized on. And the only thing that refers to is his private notes. That was, I think, in his diaries, which obviously he knew that he had kept, but that's never, Reagan had a diary that, where he kept his own notes about Iran-Contra, that those actually turned over to the independent counsel when Iran-Contra was being investigated. No one's ever been prosecuted for that. On the remaining classified documents, the special counsel did not find sufficient evidence that he could prove that willfulness. And so he's also, I think, trying to explain, and he is supposed to explain under the special counsel regulations his reasons for a declination to prosecute. Like, why is he not bringing charges? So one is the sufficiency of the evidence. And where he brings up Biden's age is, and it has been like decades for some of this stuff that was packed up like after he, left office or whatever, and has been sitting in his garage. What he's saying is that Biden could present a number of innocent defenses and be very sympathetic to a jury, and they would see him as this older man that just doesn't remember all these details. Again, this is also Ronald Reagan, by the way, who during
Yeah.
Iran-Contra was like, yeah, I don't remember, I don't recall. So, I mean, I don't know that this is like unique to Biden. Um, Whether that was really outside of his remit, I'm not sure. I think he could have phrased that in a less kind of politically inflammatory way. I mean, I think he could have just said that he would be sympathetic to a jury because of the time, because of the passage of time and the fact that he's older or something like that. The way that he phrased it really is something that the media seized on, and but I think the big piece that became overlooked in this are the key differences between this and the Trump classified documents case. And you remember the saying with Bill Clinton when he said it's the economy, stupid.
Mm-hmm.
It's the obstruction, stupid. It's there's just no evidence in the Biden case, and Hearst says this, that he intended or tried to obstruct the investigation anyway. In fact, he actually volunteered. He reported it. He self-reported, had the FBI come search everything, and then complied with everything. And I think if Trump had done that, he would not be in the situation that he's in with that particular case either.
It's also the politics of it, right? I mean, it's almost it's a lot like national security, but on these legal cases, it's like what can be pulled out and weaponized, because most people aren't going to read the report. They're not going to understand the legalese. They're going to follow, whatever news source they're already following. That's just going to compound and weaponize things. And I think the challenge for Biden is it kind of hit him where it hurts. It hit him on his age. It hit him on his, on whether or not he's fast enough to keep up with what's happening in the world. And right now, I think even the youngest of people are having a hard time keeping up with what's happening in the world. But you're helping us do that. And I know you've got to run over to ABC to do another hit. So I want to thank you for helping us understand this madness. I hope you'll come back again. I recommend everybody check out Asha's Substack, check her out on ABC and on Twitter, where you are holding the line on Twitter, like me. Like we're still there.
I know. I
Right?
tried to leave, and then it's like a abusive boyfriend or something. Like I just come back.
It's a really shitty club that you loved when you were younger, and you still have some friends there. And it's like, man, I like that place. The music used to be better, and the drinks used to be cheaper, and now we're all older. But you know what? There's still something here. So I'm in there with you. So I'll
Okay.
see you at Club X in the future. Thank you for all you do, Asha, for your students and for this country. We really appreciate your leadership and your clarity in times like this, especially.
Thank you.
Thanks, Asha. Stay vigilant.
Bye-bye.